There are new bombshell claims today from royal insiders who say King Charles's cancer is incurable and he will likely die with the disease.
What do you do when sources close to the palace confirm the king may not beat his illness, and the man who will inherit the crown has to stand before an entire nation and find words strong enough to hold it together? That is the position Prince William reportedly found himself in. And according to multiple sources familiar with the events that followed, within minutes of a private medical confirmation reaching the royal household, William and Catherine made an announcement nobody inside the palace walls was prepared to hear. Royal insiders are now describing King Charles's cancer as incurable. Every royal crisis has a moment that everyone later admits they saw coming, but nobody stopped. This one began not with a public announcement, not with a headline, and not with anything a camera ever recorded. It began with a dinner at Windsor that was supposed to be calm and became something nobody at that table could forget. During what had been arranged as a quiet family evening, Charles reportedly reached for his glass, stopped mid-conversation, and looked toward William with an expression that, according to accounts from those present, made the entire room fall silent before anyone had processed why. Charles had entered that dinner determined to maintain control. The king wanted one evening of calm discussion about future royal duties, the official state visits, ceremonies, and public appearances that keep the monarchy visible and active, without panic spreading through the household around him. William noticed the change before anyone named it. He had been listening as Charles discussed scheduling when the monarch's voice reportedly weakened mid-sentence. Catherine looked across the table and saw his fingers press against the edge as if steadying himself through pride alone. She did not interrupt. She did not alarm the room. But she understood in that instant, according to accounts from those familiar with her response, that this was not ordinary tiredness. This was the body warning the crown. Charles tried to continue. He forced another sentence, then stopped again. That second pause carried more fear than any confession could have, because everyone at the table felt it before anyone said it aloud. William reportedly pushed back his chair. Not dramatically, not for effect, but sharply enough that everyone in the room heard it. The sound cut through the dinner like a signal. The sun stood where the heir had been sitting a moment before. Catherine saw it happen. She understood the future king had crossed from concern into something closer to command. The dinner ended early. No explanation followed that evening. A confidential medical review was ordered after Charles returned to his private rooms. A serious assessment by trusted doctors examining what the king could safely continue doing. That review moved the crisis from private family worry into official palace preparation. The palace was no longer asking whether something was seriously wrong. It was asking how long it could remain private. Catherine later found William alone in a corridor, standing outside Charles's closed door. He did not speak at first. He stood there carrying the knowledge that a father's vulnerability had just become a potential national turning point. The princess stayed beside him without filling the silence. They both understood, by accounts from those familiar with the moment, that the family had crossed a line it could not step back over. The palace had survived scandals, public rifts, and national storms across centuries. But nothing inside its walls, according to those familiar with the events that followed the health confirmation, felt as dangerous as what happened in the private room where William, Catherine, Camilla, and Charles sat together with the truth between them. No cameras. No polished statements prepared in advance. Just four people and a reality none of them had chosen. Camilla reportedly demanded an answer before anyone else could settle the room. The Queen Consort wanted to know why she had not been permitted to shape the wording of the announcement. Why William and Catherine had spoken first. Why the king's condition had been placed before the public with the kind of honesty that left no comfortable distance between the news and the people receiving it. Charles sat at a small table, present but visibly carrying the weight of everything the room contained. He did not interrupt immediately. He watched Camilla speak. He watched William stand near the door as though guarding both his father and the future waiting beyond it. The prince understood what this room represented. If the family fractured here, visibly, permanently, the monarchy would bleed from the inside at the exact moment it most needed to appear unbroken. Camilla said the words used in the announcement had made Charles look weak. Her voice carried fear, but it arrived as accusation. William answered with quiet fury, according to accounts from those familiar with the exchange. He said hiding the truth would have made the family look cruel. And cruelty, he said, would damage the crown far more permanently than honesty ever could. Catherine stepped forward before the argument could break all the way open. She did not raise her voice, but her words cut through the room with the force that quiet certainty carries when every other voice has been raised. She reminded them that Charles was still sitting there, still listening, still a human being beneath every title attached to his name. The monarchy had already asked too much of the king's body. It could not now ask him to sit and watch his family fight over how fragile he was permitted to appear. Charles reportedly confirmed, according to accounts from those familiar with the conversation, that he had personally approved William and Catherine's role in delivering the announcement. He trusted them to protect both the monarchy and the public simultaneously. The crown needed one steady voice at that moment. He had decided whose voice that should be. William did not look like someone who had won something. He looked devastated. Then came the detail that changed the temperature of the room entirely. Camilla learned, in that same gathering, that certain royal duties had already been quietly reviewed, and that specific responsibilities might move toward William sooner than anyone had publicly acknowledged. The Queen Consort went still. She had prepared herself for grief. She had prepared herself for illness. But influence moving without warning felt like a loss that had no official name and therefore no official place to be grieved. Charles lowered his eyes. The room absorbed what had just been said. And from that moment, the crisis was no longer only about health or grief or family pain. It was about power. Royal power rarely arrives as thunder. It arrives through changed schedules, shifted folders, and the quiet movement of decisions from one desk to another. After the health confirmation, one reality became impossible for anyone inside the palace to ignore. William was no longer standing outside history waiting for it to call him forward. It was pulling him in. William sat with the duty folder open before him, according to accounts from those familiar with the scene, but did not turn the page. A duty folder is a private collection of schedules, public visits, and official responsibilities prepared for working royals. Every page showed where the king might no longer appear, and every replacement line brought the future king closer to a role he had never wanted to inherit through fear. Catherine told him, by accounts from those close to the couple, that protecting Charles did not mean replacing him. It meant giving the monarch space to define what his remaining strength looked like on his own terms. Her words mattered because the palace needed steadiness. But William needed permission to remain a son before the institution demanded he become a symbol. A palace aide entered with a marked list from Charles's office and revealed, according to accounts from those familiar with the household record, that the king had already placed William's name beside several upcoming engagements before the public announcement had been made. The monarch had understood the decline earlier than most people around him. He had not been careless. He had been preparing. That discovery hit William harder than any direct command could have. It proved his father had been quietly building toward this transition while carrying the weight of it entirely alone, thinking about the future while hiding the pain of the present from everyone closest to him. Camilla discovered the shift when a decision that once would have reached her first moved through William's office instead. She stood frozen, according to accounts from those familiar with her response, when she learned that certain instructions were being reviewed by the prince before final approval. She had feared grief. She had feared illness. But influence moving without warning or acknowledgement felt like a loss that belonged to no category she had prepared for. For all the palace doors, protocols, sealed statements, and polished official language, the moment that mattered most happened in a room where none of it existed. Charles was not a symbol in that room. William was not only an heir. They were father and son, sitting close enough for silence to carry what pride had spent years refusing to say. William entered alone because Charles had reportedly asked for it that way. A private royal room is a protected space where family matters can be spoken without staff, advisors, or institutional pressure reshaping them into something more manageable. That mattered because this was no longer about strategy. This was about a father telling his son what fear had cost him. Charles looked at William with a softness that, according to accounts from those familiar with the exchange, the palace had rarely allowed him to show. The king acknowledged that the announcement had changed everything. He acknowledged that the future king had carried the first blow in public before he had finished absorbing it privately. Charles reportedly told William he was sorry, not for being ill, not for needing help. He was sorry the burden had arrived this way. through fear rather than through the calm, prepared handover he had spent years imagining. William lowered his head before answering. He said he was not angry at the burden. He was afraid of losing his father inside it. Those words, by accounts from those familiar with the conversation, broke through every layer of royal distance the two men had built between themselves over decades. For a moment, there was no crown in the room. Only love under the specific pressure that comes with being this particular family. Charles reached for William's hand. The gesture was small. It carried years of everything they had found difficult to say. The king had spent his life inside duty, learning how to translate feeling into function, how to carry private pain inside public composure. The prince had learned that same lesson by watching him. Now both men sat with the truth exposed and no function available to translate it into. Charles was still the monarch, but he was also a father asking his son to be brave before either of them felt ready. Charles reportedly explained, according to accounts from those familiar with the conversation, why he had specifically chosen William and Catherine to confirm the news. He wanted the nation to see continuity wrapped in genuine compassion. He trusted Catherine's calm, her judgment, and her particular ability to hold the future king steady when grief threatened to convert itself into panic. He also reportedly made one thing clear. Camilla had to be protected from humiliation, but she could not be permitted to control the emotional honesty of the announcement. The public deserved truth more than the palace deserved comfort. William rose slowly when the conversation ended. He did not look relieved. He looked changed. Charles watched him go with what those familiar with the moment described as pride and sorrow occupying the same expression simultaneously, knowing the son who entered carrying fear was leaving carrying something heavier and more permanent. Resolve. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment below with the words, "I am still here." Let us see who is genuinely following this story all the way through. By midday, the story had left the palace entirely. It moved into homes, offices, cafes, and crowded streets where people stopped scrolling and simply stared. The confirmation about King Charles's health had become more than a royal update. It had become a national pause, the kind that arrives when something the country has been quietly dreading finally has an official shape. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered. Not for celebration, not for protest, for something quieter, the shared human recognition that an era was trembling and that the people inside it were real. One woman reportedly placed a single white rose against the railing without speaking. William watched the first public reaction on a muted screen and did not move, according to accounts from those close to him. He and Catherine had not hidden behind a cold office statement. They had carried the truth themselves, in their own voices, with their own faces, and the public had felt the difference between that and the usual palace management of difficult news. Catherine stood near him as broadcasters replayed his words. She heard one presenter describe the moment as a defining test for the monarchy. She heard her own calm presence beside William described as part of the message the nation had received. She had not stood there to become a symbol. She had stood there because the prince needed her, because Charles had trusted her, and because the country needed someone to look at who was not visibly breaking. Camilla heard the public reaction from another room and understood, according to those familiar with her response, that the nation was already moving emotionally toward William and Catherine in the way that frightened nations move toward steadiness. She felt the sting of it, but she also understood why it was happening. Charles had chosen where the steadiness should come from, and the country had confirmed his choice before the day was over. In the end, the confirmation about King Charles's health did not destroy the monarchy. It stripped it bare. It removed the ceremony and revealed the fear underneath it. It removed the duty and revealed the love underneath that. It removed the polished language and left behind the real cost of a crown passing through pain rather than through the calm, graceful transition everyone inside it had hoped for. Charles accepted his revised responsibilities with quiet dignity, according to accounts from those familiar with the occasion. He signed the adjusted duty plan and looked toward William afterward with something those present described as pride far more than defeat. A revised duty plan means a changed arrangement of royal responsibilities shaped to protect the monarch's health while keeping the institution visibly steady. That mattered because this was not surrender. It was a father choosing honesty before appearance, a king choosing the future before his own comfort. William did not smile when Charles looked at him. He understood the full weight of that look, succession, love, loss, and trust all arriving simultaneously in a single moment of eye contact between two people who had spent decades finding it difficult to be this direct with each other. Camilla's heartbreak remained entirely real. The Queen Consort had lost the rhythm she once knew beside Charles, had watched decisions travel toward William and Catherine faster than her heart could follow, and had felt the particular pain of a future she had imagined being quietly redrawn without her at its center. But she had also arrived, according to accounts from those familiar with her state of mind in the days that followed, at the hardest truth available to her. Protecting the king she loved meant accepting the future he himself had trusted to his son and his son's wife. Her pain did not disappear. It simply stopped fighting what Charles had already decided. Charles had made one defining choice through all of it, the same choice that ran beneath every conversation, every silence, and every document across that devastating period. He chose honesty over secrecy, compassion over comfort, the future over his own pride. William carried that honesty forward. Catherine gave it grace. Charles gave it permission. And Camilla, wounded but no longer resisting, accepted that love sometimes requires stepping back from the control you believed was yours and trusting the people chosen to carry what you can no longer hold alone. This was not merely a story about a king's health. This was the moment William and Catherine became the living proof that the monarchy could face its own heartbreak and remain standing. And that is where tonight's story ends. If this video gave you something real, hit the like button. Subscribe if you have not already and turn on that notification bell, because what is unfolding inside the palace right now is far from over, and we are covering every layer of it. Drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you are watching from and what your local time is right now. We will see you in the next one.